record and preserve the stories of the veterans of Haworth and the wars that they served in. If you are a veteran of Haworth and would like to participate in this project,
When you were drafted, did you have a choice of a particular brand of service?
Yes.
And which one did you choose?
I took the Army. I was born in Texas. And I was born in Texas and Oklahoma, and I moved to Arizona, farmed up there, and then moved to California, farmed up there. I was in the 386th Infantry Training Battalion of the 97th Division. And when I finished the basic training, they went to the South Pacific.
I was too short to join the Marines, so I decided to go down to the Navy, and the Navy line on Whitehall Street was like 3 blocks long, and I figured by the time I get to the head of the line, the war will be over. So I was always an impatient person, and I went up to the Air Force, and there the line was only 2 blocks long. So I waited in line, and I joined the Air Force, and it was quite an experience.
I was the colonel's radio man. And as I said, seeing combat, well, the actual war had been finalized by that time, but communists were all over in China.
The quickest thing in those days was the Army, and you'd serve for 2 years.
When the war started, I was too young to be drafted, and I really thought, erroneously, that my eyesight would keep me out of the Army because I'm quite myopic. And I was drafted from New Haven and went to Fort Devens in January of 1943, as I recall. And everybody I was drafted with were schoolmates of mine in New Haven.
The basic training is tough because you're really treated like dirt. They wanted to get you used to being disciplined and obeying. And they get you up 3 in the morning, you know, for mail. And of course there's no mail until the next morning. And you were harassed like that. And you didn't get enough to eat either. You were hungry all the time. This was basic training. You were being trained to handle difficult situations.
Tell me about your boot camp and your training experience when you first joined.
I was inducted in Monterey, California, and I took I had to get all my vaccinations and everything like that, and I was there for 3 days.
And where did you do your basic training?
Amarillo, Texas. And then we flew out of Las Vegas, Nevada for a while, aerial gunnery school. And then we wound up in Seattle, Washington, is where the Boeing plant was, and that's where we got our plane. And once we got our plane, the crew was assembled, and we started to fly practice missions out of Walla Walla, Washington.
And they sent me to Camp Roberts, California, which is down near San Luis Obispo, where I took my infantry basic 17 weeks. And I finished the 17 weeks vacation, then they had a furlough. And then after that, they sent me to Camp Cook, California, which is down near Santa Barbara. And I took advanced infantry basic there. And then they sent me to San Diego, where I took amphibious training off of some island off of California. I don't know where it was. And so that's about 2 weeks. And then I got another vacation. And after they sent me to Camp Howes, Texas, where I did the advanced infantry basic again. And after that, I was about 9 weeks. And then they sent me to Shepherd Field, which is off Falls, Texas, to the Air Force. And I didn't do much there, but then they sent me there down to Orlando, Florida, where I was. And after the rest of the remainder of the time I was in the service, which is about 6 months.
I don't remember any choice I was assigned to the combat military police. And then we left Fort Devens and we went to San Antonio.
I went to England and flew out of England. As a new crew, we had to wait for the base to be finished. When the base finally was finished, we started to do some training missions over the North Sea. One of our experiences on a training mission was pretty disastrous. We flew a training mission without any guns, and we were hit by the German Air Force. We lost half the crews on that mission. We were 18 planes, and I think we lost almost 9. We were just sitting ducks for them.
My wife, that I knew, we were pen pals since 1941. She asked if I'd come up and visit with her, see her before I got discharged. So I told her I didn't have the money to come on, and she'd send me the money, and I'd come up, and then I'd get back to her as soon as I got paid. So she sent me $50, and I came all the way up from Florida on a round trip on a train for $33. And I saw her, met her the first time, and I knew I was going to marry her right away, you know. So it was love at first sight.
Where was she living at this time?
She lived here in Haworth.
Oh, okay.
She was born in Haworth.
He was from Texas, and I thought he was a cowboy.
Oh.
This was the first picture that he sent to me when we started
I was
writing.
in Arizona in 1941, and her English teacher was teaching him how to correspond with other people. So he sent out it shows one state and 2 states, and it shows one town in each state. They choose Buckeye and Chandler, Arizona, and most of the students wanted to Buckeye, so they wrote to Buckeye, and they had all the list of names, and they sent them to her teacher, and she liked my name, and she picked it out of a bunch of them, so that was it. That was 1941, and then May till 45.
We were in Shaanxi province, and the train that we were on went between Taiyuan, which was a major town, and Chinshen, and it was an armored unit. And well, I was down at Chinshen, and this communist guy opened up and fired at me, but either he was a bad shot or I was lucky, one or the other. So that took care of that.
Yeah, that's good.
He missed.
And after that, I was then sent to the southern tip of Arizona, right on the Mexican border, and that's where I spent the rest of my time.
Put us on a ship, and they had to put them in got the ship in the landing barges, and we landed. And then, when you try to make a beach landing, you drop the ramp and you run down, you get out off the boat, because the machine guns are firing at you and everything like this, and in real combat. I jumped off of the ramp, and a wave hit me and knocked me down, and I lost my rifle. I looked out, and it was floating. When you got major landing, you got foxholes, and I was cold because I was wet, so I fell asleep in the foxhole. But lucky I had someone with me to wake me up.
I became an engineer. That was my training when I went in. When I got out of high school, and I enlisted before I even graduated from high school. So I had enough credits to graduate, because all my friends had all been drafted already, and I was the youngest of the bunch, so I decided to enlist.
Okay. So how old are you?
I was 18.
You were 18? We were so naive. We didn't know about 4-letter words or how to use them. And I heard them used in such a variety of ways that I just thought it was hysterically funny. And in a way, it is.
I actually went in November 28, 1942, and I was discharged on January 19, 1945. I actually served overseas from February 1st, 1944 till August 22nd, 1944.
What was your first job assignment when you were enlisted?
Yeah, I was in infantry basic, that's all. That was it. 17 weeks of infantry basic. It was hard weeks.
From Fort Devens, we went by some circuitous route in a troop train to Texas. You know, we didn't know where we were going. Nobody ever tells you anything in the Army, at least they didn't then. So we kept watching signs, stations that we would go through, and finally we realized we were going to very far south, not to our great joy. Anyway, we got to Sam Houston. It was called Fort Sam Houston in San Antonio, and there was a part of Fort Sam Houston that we came to was called Fort Dodge.
Did you have any friends that you had basic training with that got sent over?
Oh, most of them got sent over there. I understand that most of them got wiped out. They went to stop service someplace. Most of them got wiped out. So they sent me to Santa Barbara, California, where I did advanced center basic. And had a mix-up. I was left off in most of the class, and I graduated with. I was down there about 8 weeks, and I sent me to California, to San Diego, to take amphibious training, and that lasted about 3 weeks. I didn't have a special job. You just did your training, and whatever they told you to do, that was it.
So you never got to see any combat?
No, never. Well, I went in when I was 18. By the time I had my finished my training, it was over. War was over, so I didn't go overseas.
I was a bald Turk, I was a washed-out pilot. I had too many pilots. So it was considered one of the worst positions to fly in because you couldn't fly that position with any type of parachute because you just had enough room to get in with one body. Got in through the inside of the plane, brought the turret up to a small trapdoor. We climbed in, actually put one foot on the seat and another foot on the side of the seat, and maneuvered into that position.
Were there many casualties in your unit? Yes, there were, because we lost a lot of guys in Iwo Jima. And Bobby Langner of Westwood was one of them. Nice guy. Matter of fact, they named the street after him up in Westwood, which is good. Yes. He's a good man.
Did you see combat?
No. In fact, the day I was drafted was, I believe it was July something or other, 27th perhaps, 1953. That was the same day that the Korean War ended. So the day I was drafted, the war ended. I like to joke that I caused that, of course.
Did you feel pressure or stress? And if so, how did you deal with it?
You couldn't do anything about it. You had to cope with it.
Sometimes we had problems with the radio, and fortunately I had enough electronic background that I was able to keep the thing going myself, which is a plus.
That's good.
But fortunately our end of it was pretty good. I like the next question they have here. What was the food like? You like rice?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
Okay, well now I can stand rice. But when I first came home, don't put rice in front of me. I had enough of that while I was over there to last me a lifetime. But I take a little of it now and then.
How did people entertain themselves? Well,
they had the USOs and soldiers. You go to the USOs on Saturday weekends. Had dancing and stuff like that.
We got a Saturday afternoon and Sunday off. So we would go into, I would go into Tucson, which is a city in Arizona, and we'd rent a room for overnight, and one of us would go in and rent the room, and then a crowd of us would go in and sleep on the floor and stuff like that.
Do you stay in touch with your family?
Yeah. And my bride, who wasn't my bride yet, wrote to me just about every day, and I wrote to her just about every day. And the plane would come in a couple of times a month, maybe once a month if they got too pressed. And so at least I got plenty to read. And I had plenty of writing time because there was time for that.
On occasions, we got passes to San Antonio, and I used to like to go to the St. Anthony Hotel. It was a great hotel, and you could sit up on the balcony there, and I could write letters to people, because you couldn't do that in the barracks much. There was a day room in the barracks, but forget it. You just couldn't do it.
I would write letters home to my mother and send some pictures.
Food was good food. We had clean beds to come back to if you came back at night. And I'd say the food was sufficient.
The decks had been enclosed with bunks high up. And in order to see the ocean, you had to take turns. For too many people all around. But it was, I do not get seasick. That wasn't true of many of the people I was with. They really did get sick. We were there probably for a week or two, going across the Atlantic, as we found out later, to Africa. Casablanca. I was very interested in getting away from the United States to someplace else. I'd never done that before. So that was interesting for me.
What did you do when on leave?
I went home. Just went home to be with my family, that's all.
Do you recall any particular humorous or unusual events?
You know, I was in service, but I wasn't. When I took basic training, we had to go under the infiltration fire, and infiltration course there where they had machine gun firing over your head, and you had to crawl, go through that. I went through, and I was going to go in lane 3, and then I went on over to lane 13. And as we were going through the infiltration fire, one of the machine guns dropped on lane 3 and killed a couple of boys. So I was glad I didn't go on lane 3 after that.
So it was lucky number 13.
Well, 13 was lucky to me.
I spent a great deal of time in my bunk reading. I did a lot of reading in all the years that I was in the Army.
You were allowed to fly as many missions as you would volunteer. Originally, we volunteered for 10 missions. My original crew went home after 10 missions, but I stayed on and I flew 35 missions. Actually, I flew 65 flights, which included a certain number of training flights. That would be about 30 training flights, my total record. But the 35 missions was the maximum that I wanted to fly. I mean, I could have stayed on and flown more, but I figured my last mission was D-Day, and since they were on the ground, I had enough flying. Because most of my crews never came back, either were shot down or were killed in action.
I went down to go swimming, borrowed the Jeep and went down to the river to go swimming. This guy opens fire at me from across the river. So I didn't have a weapon with me. My weapon was back in the train, so I hopped in the Jeep and went back. When I went back down there, I didn't see him. We took care of that. But they were across the river, so we had to be careful.
when we were at this little village of Bereshed out in the desert, all of a sudden the natives had an enormous festival for the Sultan. And they brought all of these fancy tents, carpeted, and beautiful Arabian horses. And then the Sultan and his entourage appeared in Cadillacs, I suppose, or something similar. And they put on quite a show with the horses galloping around. Anyway, it was the most colorful thing I saw in Africa. And then the next day, all gone. And we never understood, where had they kept those horses? Where had they kept all this equipment?
It was called the Bloody Hundred, and we were really bloody. We lost more crews than any other squadron or group in the entire 8th Air Force. And it wasn't like today with a missile hitting a specific target. You would just go in and level an entire area. And because most times on a mission you would fly anywhere from 800 to 1,000 planes. And that alone took about 3.5 hours over England, just circling and circling and circling until they got all the planes in formation to fly across. See, most of the time, if you look at the map of Europe, you would go in through the North Sea area, come down, bomb your targets, and then come across France, because you had to come back as fast as you possibly could. And that's where we ran into the most amount of fighters, German fighters.
The radio operator was in the hospital in Peking, so as a result, I was there. The colonel wanted me, I was there. I remember that one day the communist group wanted to take Ernie, the driver, I don't know how I remember his name, but he was from Pennsylvania. They wanted to take Ernie and I to some place to examine something. Mm-hmm. The colonel said, "I'll go." All of a sudden they changed their mind, they didn't want him to go.
Yeah.
And the colonel said to Ernie and I think the reason that they wanted you to go there was so that they could shoot you or whatever, and what are they going to say? Mm-hmm. You know, be their words. He could have been right.
And one time we saw a guy going by the mattress cover with German boots on. He was apprehended. He was a German officer who had escaped. But it was curious, the boots gave him away. The mattress cover was a pretty good cloak for anything. We got on ships in Casablanca loaded with German prisoners of war to bring them back here. And I was on a ship, a very small ship, called the Green Mountain. The Green Mountain was so fragile, it was bobbing up and down right in the harbor, which I thought, well, that's not a very good sign. And then we went to Boston to get on a ship, not knowing where we were going. They were very good at that, not telling you anything. But we went, this is now the North Atlantic in the wintertime. Very rough crossing. A lot of people were sick. Very, very sick. Hanging on the gate, a little sign. And it's in German. And I thought, the camp is abandoned. I've been looking at this sign for weeks, and I would like to take it. So I took it. Who is born a rooster cannot expect to die as a nightingale. Now, why they thought that something fitting for the gate of this, I do not know. And I never found anybody who did. But anyway, it was something I brought back from Africa. We were camped in a place called Todd Hall. Todd Hall was a great house. It was an insane asylum. Up the road was Peaver Hall. Peaver Hall, we had much more to do with. Peaver Hall, if you're romantically inclined at all, was a marvelous house. It was Elizabethan with a Georgian wing, and it was the headquarters for a man by the name of General George Patton. One of the few things I really liked about it was that he made his staff of colonels police up the cigarette butts around Peaver Hall. He had them walking around, and I thought this was great. The officers had to clean up. One day, for example, I was riding in a Jeep, and I saw somebody walking down this long alley. So the Jeep driver, and I said, let's give him a ride. We stopped the Jeep, and as he turned around, I saw the 4 stars. I thought, oh, God, this is Patton. So what am I going to say? The Jeep driver was practically paralyzed with fear. I said, we just wondered if you would like a lift, sir. And he said, no, thank you. I'm just out for a walk.
But once the German fighters were eliminated, then all we had to do was worry about the anti-aircrafts. Sometimes it was pretty bad. I saw combat for over 8.5 months.
8.5 months. How did you feel about that?
Well, that's my job. I felt the war was an important part of my life, and I was glad to live through it.
Peaver Hall had been, I don't know whether you ever heard of B. Lilly. B. Lilly was a famous actress who was known as Lady Peel. She was Lady Peel. It was her home. And before that, it had been the home of a whole myriad of British aristocrats. It was interesting. I like that kind of thing. This is the Cochin Peninsula. We went like this to a place called Utah Beach.
Right. The British, right?
Well, the British were down Omaha Beach here. And it was a little place called St. Mary Glees. Of course, we were being strafed.
Which is?
Well, being shot at
Okay.
by the Germans. But it wasn't that bad. It was true. We were. And then you wanted to get off the beach because you were a very good target on the beach and get back up in the woods.
So were you awarded any medals or citations?
Yes, I was. I have them here. I was awarded the Air Medal with 4 clusters. I was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, which is the highest medal of the Air Force could give you. I had the Presidential Citation with 2 clusters, and I had the European Theater of Operations with 4 clusters, plus the Good Conduct Medal and all of that.
This box was in the hedgerow. It's German. It had in it, originally, not when I got it, it had in it shells. And they had just left it because they were driven out. And I was known as the map man for our unit. So I thought this box would be very handy. No place to keep things. The box was not this color. It was a natural wood. And I found it very handy. So it went with me through France and Germany and back here. We were shown how to go down to the front. And it was my job to have furnished maps for people. I was cursed a lot because the map was difficult. We went to Chartres. I wanted to see the cathedral. So there was nobody in Chartres, no soldiers, nobody. So we're going down the center aisle of the cathedral, and coming down from the altar was General Patton with an entourage. I thought, oh boy. This is it. And instead of that, all he said was, "It's very beautiful, isn't it?" He went out and we went down to the altar. But I was interested that he didn't say, "What are you doing here?"
The second time.
He didn't say that. Finally, I got to Paris on the day of the liberation of Paris. That was a great day. I remember General de Gaulle marching down the Champs-Élysées. I remember people shooting at him because the Germans were around too. It was fantastic. Then the Battle of the Bulge, that was in December of 44. Yeah, 44. Now, we, of course, we're not combat soldiers, we're combat military police. We were taken back to Metz.
This was some of the escape money that we were given, you know, to use. I have a few more of these. I didn't bring them along. The various countries. I don't even know, Italian, French, German. I think there's some Russian in there. And they gave us as an escape kit. We used to carry these very thin cloths, which are maps of Europe and various parts of Europe, and you can pull them up in your pocket, you know, which help you if you were shot down to try and find your way back to a base. I bailed out twice over the channel, but that was when the plane just couldn't make it back, and we were out of fuel, and so we bailed out, and then the British Navy picked us up.
I remember an old woman, her house was down. She was trying to pull the lace curtains out of the rubble, and I remember helping her lift some rubble. They weren't any good, you know. She wanted them, and of course, strewn around were corpses. But it was memorable. It was memorable. I didn't like what happened in Wiesbaden, because this was a family home, and there were portraits on the walls, and some of the Americans were carving holes in the mouths to stick cigarettes in the portraits. And I don't like that kind of thing. I thought, this is ridiculous. These people had 10 minutes to get out, so what are they going to take?
A few times I was in London for a weekend, and we had to go into the subways, you know, in the underground that they call us, and there were people sleeping in the underground. So the raids were pretty intense, and I think we were just lucky that we were able to get rid of the Air Force and get rid of the jet plants that were building their jets, because they didn't have any jets in those days, but they were building them already. And then they were also building all kinds of precision rockets and so forth.
I was in Orlando, Florida, and they sent me to California to get discharged. Got discharged from Sacramento, California.
Did the GI support your education?
Yes, well, I took a course in automobile mechanics in New York City. They paid that.
I retired as a corporal. We went across the Pacific, through the canal, and up the East Coast, and got out on the East Coast, and went to the Navy station there. And then it came time, after we went back to, I think it was Lejeune, Camp Lejeune, North Carolina.
Okay.
Then from there, we were released on permanent leave. And And so as a result, what we did then was we were allowed to go home. Wonderful. So I went home.
This book is called a Conti Atlas. This book I got from a bookshelf in Bad Tolf, some house, and I thought, I have to have this book. This book has been back and forth to Europe with me. I still look up stuff. The roads are different now. It is really an absolutely marvelous book.
It was June of 1955, because I entered in 53. It was a 2-year deal. I went back to my college and I asked them if they had any suggestions as to where I could work. And they sent me to this insurance company in downtown New York called Chubb & Son. And I said, great. I interviewed and they hired me. But I was not used to sitting behind a desk. I had been active. I had played sports in high school and college, and I had always been very active. So I couldn't stand just sitting behind this desk. So after about a month, I resigned.
And I rode on the top of the train in Germany getting back to Bad Tolf. I remember a nun up on the top, right? You know, going through tunnels, you got down. Otherwise you'd be decapitated.
Actually, I had studied industrial engineering, and I went into a family-owned commercial laundry business. And I was in that business for about 50 years. Which was running large plants of industrial laundries. And now I help manage a senior citizens complex for low-income seniors up in Suffolk, New York.
Do for a career after the war was over? Well, since the war's been over.
Automobile mechanic.
And you had been doing that?
I did that for about 30 years. And then I went into business myself in landscaping. I did that for about 10 years. And then after that I got a job with Borough Hall as a crossing guard.
So then I got a job with Remington Rand selling typewriters. But I hated that too. Nobody was buying them, and you'd stick the secretaries wouldn't even let you in. It was a degrading thing. So I stopped that. Finally, I got a job with Citibank, and I stayed with them for 33 years. And I retired as a vice president. And then I guess it was 88 or something like that.
I did go to work at first for Orangeburg, the root-proof pipe. How did I ever remember that?
What was it?
Orangeburg, the root-proof pipe. I don't even know if it's still there. It's up in Orangeburg. Go to up Route 304 or something. I was still in the Marine Corps at that time. Right. And I didn't get discharged until somewhere around the middle of December. So I had like 3 weeks, maybe 4 weeks of time while I was still in. They could have called me back if they wanted, but it would have been tough because I went down to see my sister and her husband in Florida and took the bride with me, so we weren't home anymore. We were down in Florida. But they never called me back, so that was fine. I was very happy about that.
I had 2 years of college. So I went back there after the war to finish for 2 years. And then I went to law school for 3 years. And that's it. That's my education.
I went to St. Joseph's School in Oregon. And then when I graduated, the principal, Sister Alice, she said to my mother, Norman should not be taught by women, he should be taught by men. Send him to St. Peter's Prep, which is a Jesuit school in Jersey City, and that was marvelous things. All those guys that I met there that I played ball with and all, we're still close together.
The friendships made during services, will they continue after?
No. Well, I have one friend, one boy lives in Kentucky. I keep in touch with him.
Did you marry someone from Germany?
Oh, sure, certainly. But I met her here in law school. And we went back there to get married because she had promised her mother that she wouldn't, whatever she would do, she wouldn't marry an American. And I didn't know any German. I do now.
Most of the time, when you're a single person, if you make too many friends, most of them were lost. From my original crew, I think there's still about 4 of them still alive. That's out of 10. Most of them have died off. They went back. They actually never came back to England. One became a fighter pilot, and he was shot down on his 3rd or 4th missions. And the others stayed in the Air Force or something like that. I didn't.
I was selling bonds to corporations in this country, most of them out on the West Coast, and I also covered the state of Montana and the state of Alaska. So I'd get up there once in a while, and it was interesting traveling, and I enjoyed the work.
My wife and I belong to the 100th Bond Group, which has a reunion every 2 years. And when I first joined it about 15 years ago, they had over 1,000 men. They're down to about maybe 300.
I think it was a good experience, but I wouldn't want to do it again. The best part of being in service is I met her. If I'd gone in service, I probably would have met her.
And basically, that's about how it comes down. Did my time. And it wasn't always fun, but I'm glad that I was able to do my share, which at least it makes me feel that I was worth something, at least to myself, and hopefully to my country, because that's important.
The best part about it was the humor. The laughing and kidding around with my friends. I put in my time, and it wasn't that onerous, basic training was, I said, you got to kick around a little bit, but after that, it was a pretty jovial type of existence for 2 years.
What was it like?
Well, I was not very impressed, I must say. I wasn't. At the age of 19, of course, I thought I knew everything. I just thought, this is what's happening to me, and I'll do it. So I did. And I met some rather amusing and interesting characters on the way. I thought it was hysterically funny, hopelessly inept, stupid, and the food wasn't very good. But I had a lot of amusing remembrances of it.
I think it gave me an appreciation for life itself. It was a hard war. Even though that when you did get back, at least you had a nice clean bed and some warm food. The missions were kind of rough. Many times we lose half our crew on the mission. Bring them back